Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Callie and welcome to a new year. While yes, 2023 has already started and I have got a bunch of books that I want to read for this year. Before I jump into that, I wanted to make a video of all the books that I gave 5 stars in 2022. When I set out to create this video, I was not at all aware as to how many books I actually gave 5 stars. Turns out that number is 40, but I'd already taken them all off of the shelves and felt committed to continuing this video. In contrast, I read a total of 267 books in 2022, and 40 of them were 5 stars. Majority of my reading was in the 4 to 4.5 range, but these are the ones that really stood out to me. So since there are 40, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail as to why each book, what they're about and everything like that, but I will give a little tidbit as to why it was one of my favorite. So these are in order of when I read them. I have a 5-star tracker in my Always Fully Booked planner, so it was how I was able to track all of these. I did run out of room, so I had to finish it on a different page, but I do have them all very nicely organized by month. So for January, I only had 2 5-star reads, 1 fantasy and 1 romance. The fantasy was the first book that I read for 2022, and that was Beasts of Prey by Ayana Gray. This book was so magical and it just sucked me in to the entire story immediately. Amazing characters, amazing plot, amazing atmosphere. 10 out of 10. I'm gonna say I loved each one of these books, but they're all for different reasons. The second book for January is a romance, and that is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This was my introduction to Tessa Bailey and the introduction to my obsession with Tessa Bailey. I just love this because it was quick, it was fun, all the romance was phenomenal, all the smut was phenomenal. I loved this small town romance and everything about it. This is going to be a yearly reread for the summer for me. Same with Hook, Line, and Sinker, which I ended up only giving 4.5 stars. This one was still my favorite. Now, comparatively to January, February, I had 6 5-star reads. Starting off strong was Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This is a spin-off series of the Caraval series, and I loved Caraval. I loved this more. More whimsical, more outrageous, more chaotic energy. I was here for it the entire time. 2 and 3 for February was Serpent and Dove and Gods and Monsters. Serpent and Dove, witch meets witch killer. They end up having to marry because, of course they do. Romance, witches, blood magic, all sorts of just tomfoolery mixed with romance, enemies to lovers, to enemies, to friends, to lover. So much chaotic energy, and I love chaotic energy. Gods and Monsters made me sob. Serpent and Dove is probably still one of my favorite debut novels to this day. It is fantastic, sucked me in. I was really nervous because I did not care for Blood and Honey. I think I gave that one 3 stars, but boy does Shelby Maheron know how to finalize a series, because Gods and Monsters, couldn't put it down. All like 600 pages, couldn't put it down. Following up that, I have another series that I gave both books 5 stars. One was a reread. I reread Crescent City by Sarah J Maas, House of Earth and Blood, which is book 1. Listen to the audiobook, which I would highly recommend, by the way, in anticipation for House of Sky and Breath, which is definitely one of my favorite books of the entire year. If you know, you know. And I will not patiently, be waiting for the 3rd book in this series because, of course, I read this in the span of a day. I took off work, I made sure that no one would bother me, and I just binged this book so I would not get spoiled. Ended up getting spoiled anyway because of the Twitter fiasco, but that is a discussion for another day. I love Sarah J Maas. We all know I love Sarah J Maas. I have a whole shelf dedicated to her now, and I couldn't be happier. I love this series. It is Zootopia meets Fae creatures, and we have murder, mayhem, again, more tomfoolery, romance. Phenomenal slow burn romance, might I add. And just everything that I love about Sarah J Maas's worlds. The last one that I have for February is Heartstopper Volume 4. Heartstopper is what got me into graphic novels now again. Now, I haven't really dived super into the graphic novel world, but I started Lore Olympus because of this, and I love that. I think I have the first 2 volumes on my shelves. I've just been reading on the Webtoon app, but all of that is thanks to Heartstopper. I binged 1 through 3 at the end of 2021, so naturally I picked this up immediately, devoured it, and it was so good. It has so many good real life representation of mental illness and having a significant other who deals with mental illness, and all of that is represented so beautifully and so accurately. It's handled so well, and I absolutely adore this series. I will be pre-ordering volume 5 that comes out this year. Moving into March, I have 2 5-star reads. Again, 1 fantasy, 1 romance. Are we noticing a trend? There's a trend. The fantasy is The Ivory Key by Acacia Rahman. This book took me by surprise. It is a debut about siblings dealing with the loss of magic in their kingdom. They're like the princesses and princes of this entire kingdom, and their parents are just nowhere to be seen. Nowhere. And they have to deal with it. I think this book has the most accurate representation of siblings and their relationships. It's not all, oh, I'll save my sibling. Like, of course I'll save my sibling. But, like, they had the bickering and they had the little comments that siblings always make. I am the oldest of 3. And I very much related to the oldest daughter in this book. A little too real. It was great. Highly recommend this series. Actually, yeah, I think this is going to end up being a duology. The sequel doesn't come out until, like, later this year, and I'm, like, really dying for it. The romance that I gave 5 stars is The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. I ended up reading this on vacation, and this is essentially if Walt Disney had 3 really rich, really hot grandsons, and in his will, in order for them to get their birthright, they have to complete certain tasks. And we follow each brother in each book. The first and second book, which the second book is Terms and Conditions. I love that one too. Not quite as much as The Fine Print, but the third book, I believe is called The Final Offer, drops in a couple of weeks. And again, I've already pre-ordered it because of course I have. I just adored this. It was so full of that Disney wonder that I love. Obviously, this isn't Disney. It's a different name within the story. The romance was top tier. The smut was top tier. Excellent pacing, excellent character arcs, and just phenomenal atmosphere and setting throughout the entire story. For April, I've got 3 books. The first one being Ray Bear by Jordan Afueco. I adored this. It is probably the most unique magic system I have ever experienced, and I adored both these books in the duology. They were phenomenally written. I loved the rich culture and aspects of the magic and the dynasty within this book. There was also a lot of really good emotional conflict, which is one of my favorite plot points in a story, is when the main character is being pulled in several different directions and they have to decide on their own their best course of action will be for themselves, not necessarily for the kingdom, their friend, their parent, anything like that, for themselves. And this was phenomenal showing that, and I adored every second of this book. Next book for April is The Winner's Kiss by Marie Rutowski. This is the final book in the Winner's Curse trilogy. I loved all 3 books, but The Winner's Kiss took the top spot for me. I'm a sucker for a fantastic finale, and this book had everything. It wrapped everything up in a nice bow. We got a lot of things that were surprising and shocking, plot twists. We had our finality of the character arcs. All of the characters within the story were phenomenal, and all of our plots were, for the most part, tied up and resolved, and I really enjoyed that. This also had a phenomenal epilogue given how the story progressed throughout all 3 books. The last one for April, I actually don't have a physical copy of it yet, but I do really want one, and that is Grip by Kennedy Ryan. I devoured the ebook of this story, and it is one of the best romances that I have ever read. This book, I jump-started into the romance genre after finishing this, And moving into May, the first May book that I gave 5 stars was Still by Kennedy Ryan. I adored both these books. I love the fact that we still follow the central couple, where most spin-offs, sequels of romance books will follow a different couple. This one did not do that. We stuck with the main couple for both books, and I would not have had it any other way. They were both so emotionally centered, and that was where all of our plot came from, was how they dealt with emotions and just the trials of life, and I adored every second of both these books. I do have another 5 more for the month of May. The next one being The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie Oh. This is a standalone fantasy based on Asian folklore, and I think the thing that did this for me was the atmosphere. The way that this author, which I believe this is a debut, but don't quote me on that one, built this atmosphere. I was in this world. I was underwater with the gods, and I was there the entire time, standing next to our main character. It was so beautiful, so lyrical, and just had that perfect whimsical factor throughout the entire story. I've got more series for my next two, and that is Fire Falling and Crystal Crowned by Elise Kova. This is books 2 and 5 of the Air Awakened series, which I read the entire series in the span of a weekend because they were that good. But these two really stuck out to me. It is essentially a gender-bent Avatar: The Last Airbender type of thing, but throw it in a medieval fantasy world. And they're more adult, because this is, I would categorize this as like NA. I'm that cheater between YA and NA. I adored this entire series and would highly recommend to any YA fantasy lover. They're quick, easy, all on Kindle Unlimited, and they're just a great time. I adored everything about this. The magic system was really cool, very elemental based, and just top tier phenomenal magic system. Next book I have is Blood Scion by Deborah Fillet. I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This book gripped me by the heart and didn't let go the entire time. This is raw, gritty, and dark. Very dark, but a phenomenal story with phenomenal magic and a hard world to read. But again, it just gripped me from the get-go. We have these child soldiers who are forced to go against their people, and all of it was just, I don't want to say a joy to read, because that's not the right wording. It was hard to read at times. There are times where I did have to put it down and take a minute to reflect on what I had been reading. But I think that's one of the key aspects to why I love this book so much, is it made you think. And I love books that do that. The last one for May, I have Verity by Colleen Hoover. I read both of these books very close together, and that was a mistake because both of them, again, very hard to read. I had to put Verity down as well, same as Blood Scion. I had to put it down because it was just so raw and dark. The mystery had me guessing the entire time. I am team manuscript instead of letter, and I will die on that hill because I would feel like an awful person if I were team letter. And this is one of the best mysteries that I've ever read. I did go into this knowing it was a mystery. Thankfully not a romance. I mean, it is like a thriller romance, I think is how it's categorized. I wouldn't put stock into the romance aspect of it, honestly. More on the thriller mystery air side of it, but this one got me. Moving into June, I've got 4 books, and starting off strong, I have A Curse So Dark and Lonely and A Heart So Fierce and Broken by Brigid Kemmerer. These were actually both rereads for me, and I love them again the second time around. I love the different aspect of the Beauty and the Beast retelling within this book. And then I love the fact that we are not following the same main characters from book 1 in this book. Very much like a romance series, like I was saying earlier. We're following a different main character who I grew to love in book 1. And then book 3 was a mix of all 4 of them. And I thought that was a really smart way to go about this entire series. I did like book 3, just not as much as books 1 and 2 from this series. Running out of room to display these. Next up for June, I have The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. This is, again, another debut, and this is an Arabian inspired story. We've got jinn, we've got all of that kind of magical chaos, and of course our main character is a thief with a secret genie who just kind of is there because he's tied to her in some fashion that you find out later. I adored this. It was really cool and really unique. I love Arabian-inspired stories. I think that the rich cultural aspects, as well as the storytelling, is inviting and rich, and I love how much emphasis there is on the importance of storytelling within the culture. I think that's phenomenal, and I love seeing it in these kinds of books. The last one for June is a romance, and that is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This was my first Abby Jimenez book, and I am now officially hooked on her writing. This was a phenomenal one. We have an older couple. We have that they are already well developed in their careers. It is a chance meeting. They're from two different worlds. She lives in the city. He lives in a small town. He has a baby goat. I was here for the baby goat the entire time. I loved it. Everything about this was so sweet. I was swooning in real life, and this book did make me sob at the end, so you know it's a good book. Up next, this series actually took me about 2.5 months to complete because I listened to the audiobooks, but literally the entire Aurora Rising series is next. Aurora Rising, Aurora Burning, and Aurora's End. I listened to all three, would highly recommend the audiobooks. It is a full cast, and it is very well done. It was a reread for the first two books for me, so that I could remember everything and be prepared for Aurora's End. This series was perfect. I have no complaints. We have a sci-fi ragtag team of people who are thrust into this thing that has to do with their destiny, and none of them know what's going on, and it's phenomenal. There are so many wild twists and turns throughout the entire series, and I was here for all of it. I just sat on my kitchen floor listening to the last hour of this book sobbing. It was so good. I have nothing but amazing things about this entire series. It's perfect. It's perfection. It's a perfect sci-fi series. Up next, I have The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. Renee Ahdieh for me is a hit or a miss. I love the Beautiful series. I didn't care for The Flame and the Mist, and I love The Wrath and the Dawn. The Wrath and the Dawn is a retelling of one of the stories in 1001 Arabian Nights, the one where the king is killing a wife every morning and picks a new wife at the end of the day to marry. But Shazi, our main character, goes to marry the king for revenge for her friend who was killed by him, and ends up staying up late and telling him stories to keep her life long. And it was so phenomenally done. I adored this. I ended up, after I finished the series, I ended up going to the webtoon, which I would highly recommend doing. It's a phenomenal way to showcase the story. It is almost word for word exactly what happens in the book, and the art style is fantastic. I love this. Like I mentioned with The Stardust Thief, I love the importance of storytelling itself that it held within this book. And there is a little bit of magic, and it's just so much fun. There's a magic carpet, and I love it. I loved it. It was great. Next, I have another reread that I did, and that is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I did finish the entire Poppy War trilogy. I did really love it, but The Poppy War was still my favorite out of all three. I think I gave the other two 4.5 or 4 stars. Still fantastic of a series. Would highly recommend it. The Poppy War, though, is one of the best introductions to magic, to the political climate, and to an entire war zone for this country. It was so phenomenally written and phenomenally executed. I loved every second of this book. Again, very much not like a joy to read, but it made you think, and I loved how throughout the entire story, no one is good in this entire story, and R.F. Kuang is not afraid to lean into that aspect. She leans into the darker parts of war and what it takes to win a war, and it's not pretty. And she's not afraid to jump into that at all. And I admired R.F. Kuang for the way that she tackled this entire series. Next, I have Twisted Lies by Ana Huang. This is the 4th book in the Twisted series, but Twisted Lies was my favorite. I just adored this entire Twisted series. It is a romance. It is a teetering on dark romance. I would probably categorize it somewhere in between like the mafia and dark romance, as well as like contemporary and swoony. But I absolutely adored this story. All of the Twisted girls and the Twisted guys are fantastic. Christian and Stella's story really spoke to me, and I adored every second of them together. Up next, I have probably my new favorite author coming out of 2022, and that is Ali Hazelwood with The Love Hypothesis and Love on the Brain. As someone who has a degree in a science, I adored these books. They were so much fun. I love the different terminologies and how, while yes, the romance is the first and foremost plot line, we also have smaller plot lines about how hard taking the graduate exam can be and how unfair it is, as well as sexism in the academic field. And I love how Ali Hazelwood handles this, and you can definitely tell that Ali Hazelwood herself is an academic, which she is, and I adored that in both these books. Moving into September, I've got two books, which both I read on ebook. So the first one being Praise by Sarah Kate. This book just took me by surprise. It's age gap, it's taboo, and it has to do with the BDSM community. And I adored every second of this entire book. So many things about this book I should have hated. I loved every second, and I have now read the entire series that is out for the Salacious Player series. Highly recommend all of them, but this one will still be my favorite. Second book that I read on ebook is one that Hannah bullied me into reading, and that is Culty by Mariana Zapata. Now, this is my first Mariana Zapata book, and oh my god, I think Hannah got so annoyed with me. This is the slowest of slow burns I've ever read. It is another age gap, but not quite as big as Praises, where we are following a pro women's soccer player as she meets her hero. As he becomes a coach for her team, and they develop a beautiful friendship that develops into a beautiful relationship. And I adored every second of this book. I want more. Hannah and I ended up finding this weird epilogue on her website a couple months ago, and I still read it every other day because it makes me happy. October was a really good reading month. I have 6 again, and with a series. So I've got Blood Heir and The Crimson Rain, both by Amelia Wenzel. This is a dark Anastasia retelling, but with blood magic. And it's fantastic. It's dark. It's fun. I think my favorite part of this entire series is Anna is not afraid to go to the dark side. She is very morally gray, and she's not afraid of it. She is not one of those YA main characters where no, my power scares me. Yes, her power does scare her, but she leans into that fear to get what she wants after everything's been taken from her. And I admired Amelia Wenzel for really leaning into that aspect of Anna's personality, because I lived for Anna in this entire series. Up next, I have The Lovely War by Julie Berry. Again, this book took me by surprise. This is a historical romance where Aphrodite is telling this love story, these 2 love stories that are happening during World War I. And I'm not really big into the World War I, World War II themed books. It's just not something I've ever really been interested in. So I was very hesitant to go into this, but I ended up listening to this book, and holy crap, it was so good. Again, this was one of those audiobooks where I just ended up sitting in my living room, just pacing, listening to this book, because I needed to know. I needed to know that everything was going to be okay and how this book was going to end. It was beautifully crafted. I loved just the atmosphere, the way that Aphrodite and the Greek gods were weaved into this story, because it is surrounding World War I. Ares had a ton to say about this. And it was really interesting how Ares kept getting really excited about the war bits, and Hephaestus ended up getting really excited about the actual romance. And you could just see how much love and care Aphrodite took in her position as the goddess of love within these just 2 very different, but they wove together seamless love stories. This year, I really fell in love with Anna Huang. I ended up pre-ordering King of Wrath on my Kindle, so I read this the day it came out. This is a spin-off of her Twisted series, but following a different set of characters. In this one, this is a marriage of convenience, or not marriage of convenience. It is an arranged marriage, enemies to lovers, billionaire romance, and it was so good. I devoured it within the day. It was just, it scratched that romance itch. If you read a lot of romance, a lot of them start to blend together, but I still find myself going back to my notes and my highlights of this book just because of how different and gripping that it was. Next few, I actually had a huge romance kick after Lovely War, so the next one that I have is It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. I pre-ordered this book because I loved It Ends With Us. It Ends With Us is not a romance. Please do not go into that book thinking it is a romance. I did. Very poor choice. This book is a romance, and I really liked how this was handled. I know a lot of people don't like how this was handled, but I really loved Lily and Atlas's story, and actually getting Atlas's backstory given what we knew from It Ends With Us. I devoured this the day it showed up at my house. It is a beautiful story of rebirth and renewal for Atlas and Lily, and that's all I wanted. The next romance that I ended up reading was Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. This is my second Christina Lauren book, and the first one was In a Holidays, and I didn't care for it, but Hannah forced me to listen to this book. She found it on Scribd and sent it to me, so I listened to this, and now I'm in love with Christina Lauren. This book hit different. Yes, it is a romance, and it is a childhood romance, rekindling, lost love, a lot of miscommunication, but not like the miscommunication trope. It was very different from that aspect, and I couldn't put it down. Again, this is one, I ended up just pacing my house, trying to figure out, I finished this at work, and then had to like type yell at Hannah because of that ending. Or because of the twist. I couldn't handle it. And then when it finished, I yelled at her some more through chat because I couldn't just go up and yell at her at her desk because that is unprofessional. The last romance of 2022 that I did give 5 stars was Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. I kept seeing this all over TikTok. I kept seeing snippets of little pieces from the book, and I finally just caved. I love a good college sports romance, and we're following an ice skater and a hockey player. Everything about this was fantastic. There were a lot of topics, including mental illness, eating disorders, and toxic relationships. All of that was really tackled really well within this romance, and I still get the little snippets and stuff. I started following Hannah Grace on TikTok, and she posts all the time, and I devour it every time. And I get happier every time I see the snippets from my favorite scenes. The next one that I have is The Starlisty by Erin Morgenstern. This one very much surprised me. I liked The Night Circus, but I didn't love it. I loved this book. It was so lyrical and whimsical. It was more distending your own reality. We find ourselves with this kid who finds a book in a library that is his life story, and he goes on this wild mystery about trying to figure out why his story is in this library. And it really is just a love letter to readers, writers, anybody in the literary world is what this book was. And I think about it all the time. I bought this hardcover copy because I saw it at half price, and I had the paperback. That's where I read it via my paperback, and then I saw that they had this edition, and I bought it because, of course, I did, because I'm obsessed with this book. Obsessed. The last 3 books that I have are actually all a part of a series, and that is the Ember and the Ashes series, books 1, 3, and 4. I did really like book 2. I think I gave it 4 or 4.5 stars, but these three hurt me, but in the best way possible. I love this series. Books 1 through 3 were actually a reread, so that I could prepare myself for the final book, and I will die on the hill that this is one of the best finale books I have ever read. It was, again, very similar to A Winter's Kiss, which is right here. I found it. It had everything that I wanted. It wrapped up everything. I got all my questions answered. There were still so many plot twists. The plot kept me engaged. Everything about this finale was perfect. I wouldn't have changed a single thing. And this series, overall, 5 stars. This series is fantastic. I know you see a ton of people telling you that this series is great. I will be another one of those people. This is one of my favorite series of all time. I love Elias and Laia and Helene with all my heart, and I will do anything for these characters, including save them from Sabaa Tahir, because she was mean to them throughout the entire story. So those are what I have for all the books that I gave 5 stars this year, or not this year, in 2022. I had so many fantastic reads. A lot of these were rereads, but I love rereading books, and this is why I get to experience them in a new way. I get to notice all the new things, and then being ready for that finale or the sequel, it just adds so much more context. And I love all these books are phenomenal. I'd highly recommend any of them. They're just so good. I had such a great diverse reading in 2022, and I definitely plan on keeping that going in 2023. Now, I know this video has been long, and I'm really sorry about that, but that's going to be it for today's video. So please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We post now on Wednesdays and Fridays with the occasional Sunday, depending on how we feel. But that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you in our next one. Bye!